Shalom. Welcome to Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman. I'm joined in the studio by Mark Finkelstein, and we don't have a guest in the studio today. We figured we would use this week to catch up on all of the various events that are going on, that have been going on around the world. There's a whole lot to talk about in the Middle East, and we simply haven't had a chance to talk about it. So. Let's talk about the world in 5 minutes. What are some of these things? Well, first of all, there is at least the prospects of an agreement with Iran on some sort of concessions for its nuclear program in exchange for a reduction in sanctions. The government of Israel is for sure opposed to such an agreement because it believes that it would weaken the pressure on Iran and make it much more difficult to achieve any kind of a real full-scale agreement going forward. We'll talk a little bit more about that. There is a report today that Saudi Arabia has already made a deal with Pakistan to acquire nuclear warheads in the event that Iran obtains a nuclear weapon. And in fact, Saudi Arabia already has the Pakistani ballistic missiles necessary to carry those warheads in Saudi Arabia, simply waiting for warheads to be put into them. So in case you're wondering what the time frame would be for things, well, let's just put it bluntly, all hell breaking loose the second Iran gets a nuclear weapon, the answer is it could be very, very quick. In fact, there's a possibility that Saudi Arabia could even get nuclear weapons in its hands on Saudi soil prior to Iran even getting a nuclear weapon, unless the Saudis are convinced that Iran is not going to be able to obtain one. And so the issue here seems to be that much of the world pretends that this is an issue of sole concern to Israel. And the United States seems to be treating it as if it's somehow only Israel's issue. First of all, the United States it needs to be concerned about Iranian nuclear weapons, but for sure Saudi Arabia does. And there's much more to that issue, and we can talk about that a little bit later on the show. Today, Secretary of State John Kerry made some criticisms of the Israelis and their positions on the peace process, which seem to be which are very problematic to me, and I think they're very problematic to the peace process. And I'm not sure why a Secretary of State leading a secret negotiation would make such statements, to be honest. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I've got some arguments as to why he may have done it, but none of them are good, and all of them are significantly problematic. And that's really what concerns me is why Secretary of State Kerry would have made those comments. Of other concerns, there's some domestic concerns. We're looking at a situation right now in which the SNAP program, that supplemental nutrition program that helps a lot of families eat over the course of the month, has been cut in budgetary cuts. It hasn't been cut completely, but what was an increase has been cut off. And so functionally for the people who are on the SNAP program, they're getting less money each month to pay for food. And if you happen to be one of those people, this is going to have a significant impact on your life because you don't have other money to get to use for food, because if you did, you wouldn't be on the SNAP program. So that's a very big concern. How do we restore this funding? Where is money going to come from to make up for the difference? Because we can't just say eat less. And then finally, of concern to a lot of Americans is the Affordable Care Act and continuing problems with registering for healthcare coverage through healthcare.org, healthcare.gov, excuse me, and the the general rollout of the healthcare program. It came out today that only 1,100 people can be on the system at any one time. This is a system that, at minimum, was hoped to handle 10,000. At least the designers hoped to handle 10,000. The government said that it would handle 60,000, and they had 250,000 people trying to get on it all at the same time or more during the first few days of the rollout. So this is a system that's simply not designed to handle anywhere near the capacity that it needed to handle and it needs to handle in order to take care, in order to accommodate all the people who need to get health care coverage, whose coverage for sure is expiring or will cease to exist as of December 31st because of the mandates in the program eliminating the various kinds of insurance that were not good enough, didn't meet the requirements of the Affordable Care Act. So there are a lot of different things going on. We'll talk about many, if not all, of these things during the rest of the show. This is The World in 5 Minutes with Rabbi David Kaufman.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wonderscheid.
I'm administrative manager
I am the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're gonna do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's gonna be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're gonna do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed right or it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you gonna say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're gonna be listening. They're gonna wanna know what your challenges are. Then they're gonna come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you know, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me, but is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though, I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm gonna take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed right or it's free or 100% money back.
enough said.
Shalom. Welcome back to Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman. I'm joined in the studio by Mark Finkelstein. And I was talking a little bit about healthcare. Before I even get into talking about the rollout of the Affordable Care Act, I wanted to make sure to thank our benefactor for this show, Dr. Ronald Bergman and Bergman Folkers Cosmetic Surgery and Spa. Without them, we wouldn't be able to have this show at all, and so we're very appreciative for their support. Healthcare.org, or healthcare.gov, excuse me, opened up on October 1st, and it clearly had numerous problems. Now, you know, at various times made the argument that this wouldn't happen with a private company, that private companies wouldn't make this kind of error. That's not really true. For somebody who has played the game NBA 2K14, one of my favorite Xbox games, my son plays it as well. There are numerous errors in the game, okay? And there are lots of glitches. There are all kinds of, and various video games have patches. Every video game I've ever played has had patches come out eventually. So I know that computer programs are not going to ever roll out without problems. And the bigger the program, the more problems they're going to be. We're talking about something that is a massive project. Now, the problem with this rollout is any company in their right mind is going to at least try to do something called beta testing or some sort of way, especially if you know you've got something big. You're putting out something that is enormous, that is going to involve lots of people. You want to make sure that really big things like knowing that your computer system can handle 1,100 people instead of 250,000 people, it might be useful. You might be able to say, you know what, maybe we should start signing up Des Moines this week instead of signing up all of the United States this week. These kind of things would have made it much more helpful. Now, the problem is, can the federal government do that? I would argue it can do that. It just chose not to because of the political situation.
Is it not possible that this caught everybody by surprise?
I don't think so. There are the reports that came out today said they knew about it. What I think happened, Mark, is that the government decided that they had no choice politically because the Republicans were banging so hard on the let's delay the implementation, it's not ready, it's going to have problems. The Democrats decided they couldn't play into that, and they just had to go forward with it. I think if everybody was cooperating and playing nice with one another, things would have happened differently because at that point the government would have been more willing to say, you know what, we need to rethink this. The biggest problem, to be honest, is December 31st, a large number of policies, millions of policies, as a matter of fact, simply go out of existence because they're banned according to the Affordable Care Act. There are policies that don't provide the minimum requirements of the Affordable Care Act, and therefore they are not going to be available. So the people who have those policies can't just hold on to them. If the government says, oh, you know what, we're going to delay this until June or July, even if they decided we're going to delay it until March, it doesn't matter. Those people are going to be uninsured as of January 1st. They have to get coverage.
Well, what about the possibility of putting in a temporary fix? You know, you mentioned the possibility, for instance, of limiting enrollment to certain states or areas that would decrease the volume on anything. But in terms of the government saying, look, we can't fix it so that your policies will be reinstated, but what we can do is we can promise X, Y, and Z in the interim.
Well, what I think they need to do, to be honest, and I think Congress would be smart to do this tomorrow, but they won't because the whole idea of partisan politics is to make sure that the president suffers as much political damage as possible out of this. What they really need to do is they need to say if your coverage is expiring December 31st, you're first in line.
Right.
And that they need to say, we're not going to let anybody else sign up for the next 3 weeks.
And we're not going to
only those whose coverage is expiring. Then you can cover all the people whose coverage is expiring, and then you can move on.
And there may be something else to do to ensure that people don't fall through the cracks before this is fixed.
Or you have a little button that you click on the website, my coverage is expiring, or I need new coverage. I don't have coverage. And then you can sign up. Instead of having everybody go through the whole comparison thing, is it better than what I have now?
Right.
You give priority to the people who are going to be completely screwed if they don't have coverage as of December 31st.
Now, I heard on the news today that there are nonprofit organizations who've been working to instruct people on how to register. And
look, I don't think there's even a question that there are people who can call in and talk to people on the phone. The government's got those lines ready to go, but those lines aren't The ability to do that is even less than the ability to go through the website. The website can hold more people than can call in. So what you're dealing with a lot of the time is people with lengthy medical histories,
Right.
some of whom may have difficulty communicating their medical
This
history.
has to be vetted to begin
And
with. Yeah.
I mean,
And
I can tell you there are a lot of people, especially people who are ill, who have long medical
Right.
histories, who may take an hour, 2 hours to go through this with somebody online to make sure that they understand it on the phone. I mean,
You don't think-
and so there needs to be the rollout of this to try to do this in 3 months seems to have been extremely ambitious. Especially since the people who are most in need of getting coverage are the ones who are most sick, which means that the ones who are most sick are going to have both the most difficulty doing it,
Right.
and the most information to put in.
Yeah.
There are other people complaining about things like privacy concerns and things like, and I'm not saying that those aren't valid. What I'm just saying is that you've got a situation in which you have very sick people, many of whom have never had coverage, and many of whom have had coverage that is now
Terminated.
obsolete.
Yes.
And those people are going to have more difficulty signing up. They're going to have more difficulty understanding the process. And the government really needs to go out of its way to help those people. And I don't know that the government has set up, at least at this point, a way to direct those people to a certain place to get them additional help.
I would have to believe that within the administrative structure, there's now been a committee that said, look, we're going to have a problem because of the deadline restrictions and all the screw-ups. Why don't you suggest 3 or 4 ways that we could circumvent this on a temporary basis? Don't you think those discussions are happening?
Well, I think there's a lot of discussions happening. The question is politically, what can they do? You can't have the government just blanketly insuring people who aren't able to sign up. I mean, which would be the solution? I mean, what are you going to say? You can't force the insurance companies to honor policies that don't exist. You'd essentially be creating a single-payer system that doesn't exist to cover the people while you're waiting for them to sign on.
Right.
So you're talking about a massive, I mean, even more massively difficult problem than you would have before. Can you imagine being a doctor wondering how they're going to get paid from a government program that doesn't exist? In a situation where the Republicans and Democrats can't even dialogue about what's going on, who would fund that?
So right, you have the political level on top, then you have the structural level, and then you have to have some sort of mechanism to enact whatever plan you have.
It's fairly clear that the rollout simply could not have worked the way that they planned on it. Not only because the computer system didn't work, but simply because they didn't know all the problems that they were going to have when they rolled this out. They're now having to adapt to new problems. It's clear that it wouldn't have worked if they had beta tested this. If they had said, let's roll it out in Iowa as the first state, or let's roll it out in a state that was really super gung ho about it. I mean, we can find Florida, for example. Let's say or California or Rhode Island, a smaller state. Let's say we're going to roll it out there. Let's make sure that we've got all the kinks worked out as best we can.
Suppose though that the political capital will have to be expended by the administration in order to get some understanding from its adversaries. Well, the adversaries, not for the sake of the people, not bend in order to comply.
I think what you're going to have is the Republicans are going to propose some alternatives that are going to be very clear and problematic for the administration, and they're going to gleefully do it. And I can see it happening, in December as things are still not working out.
Yes.
And
will the administration
what it'll be, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what possible alternatives there are.
Yeah,
Mark.
that's leverage, though. The fact that this will happen, you would hope that the welfare of the country transcends whatever temporary political problems that are engendered by this.
Absolutely, and we'll I'm sure talk more about the healthcare situation next week when we're joined by Rachel Laser and Barbara Weinstein from the Religious Action Center, who will be our guests on the show next week.
Yeah, we're not even talking now whether the plans are beneficial or not.
Oh yeah, I mean, look,
this is just the technicality of rolling it out.
The real problem we're running into here is we don't even know whether this is a good program on the whole yet, because we haven't even gotten to that point yet where we were able to analyze what's actually happened. I know people for whom it's helped already.
Of course.
And there are clearly people who are going to have problems with it as well. There's nothing that would work for everybody. So
just to extend this for a second, the fact is this is something that will enable more people than ever before to get health insurance who are not covered now. That itself is a blessing, regardless of the political conundrums that go with it. Don't you want people to have health insurance?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, we want people to be able to have as much coverage as they can get. Certainly, that keeps things affordable for the rest of us. One of the concerns now is that a lot of young people aren't bothering to sign on to the program, and they're the ones who are designed to not need the system and therefore pay into the system without taking out of it,
right?
And keep the system healthy. If those young people decide they'd rather pay the fine, if the healthy people decide they'd rather pay a $1,200 fine than buy $5,000 health care coverage, we're all in trouble. The system is going to be in trouble.
Right, because it has to be funded from the bottom.
Yeah.
And what we're hearing to a certain extent is that some groups of people are being promised some sort of a discount, which has to come from someplace else. The funding, if somebody is going to get a discount, that has to be funded from some monies. And therefore, you have to eventually compare the inflow and outflow of the funding to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's just like the tax system, Mark. You can't long have a system where it's spending money and there's no money coming in. When I did my initial research, and I worked on trying to figure out how to solve the healthcare situation for a long period of time, and we're talking about group plans that would cover multiple organizations in Iowa, that was our concern, was to try to work on small congregational health insurance. A lot of churches and synagogues have a couple of employees, and it was difficult to get group health insurance. So we were talking about getting a larger group plan,
creating
a larger group.
Yes.
Well, what ended up happening was the insurance companies said, well, this is silly, because what's going to happen is the sick people are going to want the health insurance from the group, and the healthy people are going to leave the group and do something else. So you're essentially going to create a plan for nothing but sick people, in which case there's nobody subsidizing the cost, and the actual cost of insuring somebody who's sick, particularly when you know they have pre-existing conditions, which is another thing that makes this situation much worse. Okay, much more costly, much more damaging to the insurance companies, is that if somebody's on $500 a month healthcare medicine coverage, you're spending $6,000 a year without even batting an eyelash on anything else. Mm-hmm. That's no doctor's visits. That's no hospitalization. It's nothing. So there's no way you can charge that person anything less than $6,000 at minimum, and more than likely you're going to charge them $15,000 a year, something like that, because they could have all kinds of other problems.
And if you divide that by 12 months, you get your premium.
Now, the way insurance works is you have 50 people or 100 people or 1,000 people paying in at $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 a person, and then when the person has the $250,000 health care coverage bill, you end up helping to cover it from the cost of the other people. But if all those healthy people aren't there, and all you've got are people who are costing you at least what they're putting in, your system goes bankrupt very quickly. That's a recipe for rapid disaster. So there are a couple different concerns that are going on here. One of the concerns going on is that people aren't able to register to begin with. The people who are most likely to say, just throw up their hands and leave, are the healthy people. So you're going to initially put in a whole bunch of people who are sick with a substantially smaller pool of people who are healthy who you need to fund the system. And in the long run, what's going to happen is not only are you going to have bad enrollment numbers initially, but you're also going to have massively bad cost numbers going forward because the money subsidizing the outflow isn't coming in.
Wouldn't this have been less of a problem had the matter been tackled incrementally instead of revolutionary?
Look, Mark, there are all kinds of different ways it could have been handled. The real problem is that we knew for a long period of time coming into this that there would have to be all kinds of tweaks, not just operational tweaks within the programming, not just programming of the website. There needed to be legal tweaks.
Oh, sure.
And we don't have enough cooperation in the Congress right now to pull that off. So what happened was the Democrats won a hard-fought battle to get the Affordable Care Act to pass. And then they lost any political power to get it to work. The second they got it to pass, there was no way they were going to be able to get anybody to pass any further legislation to deal with it, to tweak it in any fashion.
Right.
Nor is there going to be political will in the Congress to work with delays or anything like that. And so we're in a situation in which they passed something that needed a lot of support that's not there. And how they're going to move forward with it, I don't know, because obviously you're going to have upset Republicans and Democrats on this. This isn't just harming Democrats. It's not something that's not going to have Republican voters calling their Republican senators and congressmen and saying, do something about it. At some point, the Republicans are going to need to deal with that. They need to come up with a solution because they're going to need to present one. They're either going to have to accept the solution that the Democrats put forward, or they're going to need to have an alternative, and it's going to need to be one that works. And at this point, with millions of people losing health care coverage completely as of December 31st, they can't just propose to do nothing. Delaying the implementation of this is going to be catastrophic at this point. They need to figure out how to make it work, not how to delay it. There's certain things they can delay, possibly. If they delay mandates, then maybe these insurance companies would be willing to reinstate policies and to keep people insured. That's possible.
Yeah.
But I don't know that the insurance companies are necessarily going to be willing to do that because that's a massive amount of administrative effort on their part that they're not going to get paid for.
Well, the appeal will be to national interest, I suppose. It's in the nation's interest that people be as flexible as possible now to avoid the catastrophes that are likely to come.
The situation is much more politically problematic than people admit. It's clearly a PR problem for the Democrats. It's going to hurt them at the polls, but it could also hurt the Republicans at the polls if they don't act more concerned about the people whose lives are really going to be affected directly, which is going to include a number of their voters. And
one has
so
to hope
everybody has to be concerned about their constituents.
Well, that's true.
And I'm not talking about any specific congressmen or senators, by the way, here. I'm just talking in general. The rhetoric can't be about, oh, look how bad it's working. It needs to be about how we make it better. And I think the dialogue needs to change. It needs to change quickly because we're 2 months away from this deadline.
The dialogue has to change, but I think most Americans want something to work. We don't want people to suffer unnecessarily.
Absolutely we don't. And we're going to know people who are in this situation. Yes. Every single one of us is going to know somebody who's not going to have health care coverage, right, or who is going to find themselves in a situation because of this. There's all kinds of problems going on in the world here, Mark. Do you want to go through the Daily Alert today and just tell people what all's, just go through some of the stuff. It's an unbelievable array of major issues.
Yeah, one of the things that occurs to me is the domino effect of what's going on with Iran. It's long been suspected that if Iran gets even close to obtaining nuclear weapons, that there will be a desire within the other countries in the Middle East to get their own. And if indeed Saudi Arabia is making sounds to that effect, that scenario seems to be playing itself out.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just going to be Saudi Arabia. It's going to be Egypt. It's going to be some of the other countries. We're going to see a question of if the United States doesn't come in and either station weapons there or sell those weapons or allow the Saudis to have their own weapons, they're going to work with the Pakistanis, or it could be other countries come in, whether it's Pakistan, it could be North Korea. I mean, we could end up completely losing control of the situation here very quickly.
So this is a nuclear non-proliferation issue to begin with. And those, the simplistic answer given by people is, well, if only Israel would relinquish its weapons or sign the particular treaty, everything would go back to neutral.
There's a two-letter term I want to apply to that argument, but I'm not going to. The issue is very clearly this: Israel has been believed to have had nuclear weapons for the last 40 years,
That's right.
or close to it.
That's right.
This proliferation hasn't happened. So the argument that it's all about Israel's nuclear weapons is completely wrong. The clear argument here is that because of Iran's nuclear weapons and the Sunni-Shia conflict and the belief that Iran wants to be a hegemon in the region, that the other countries that want to stand up to Iran, particularly Saudi Arabia and Egypt, need to have nuclear weapons. The level of dis-ease and the level of
Fear, perhaps?
not just fear, but the belief, what's going to end up being a necessity of overreaction, is going to take hold of the whole region. You're going to see massive increase in military expenditures across the entire region because nuclear weapons provide cover for conventional weapons and terrorism.
Well, that's right.
So you're not just going to see these countries going after nuclear weapons. You're going to see Saudi Arabia saying, "Oh my God, now we need to defend. We need to more strongly defend against conventional weapons."
Conventional weapons and the use of weapons by proxies.
And also unconventional weapons, use of terrorism and all kinds of things like that. We already know Saudi Arabia has fought a conflict with Shia in Bahrain.
Mm-hmm.
This conflict has already happened before. Now, if you have a nuclear weapon in the possession of the Shia rebels in Bahrain because Iran has given them something, even if it's a dirty bomb, you completely change the whole dynamic.
Now, there are several components we're talking about. Certainly the refinement of uranium or plutonium so that a weapon can be synthesized by itself, plus the weaponry to deliver that system. What do we know about weapons to deliver systems?
Well, look, we know Iran has already developed delivery systems. They've been developing delivery systems for a long time. They were developing, they had advanced development and delivery systems when the 2007 National Intelligence Estimate came out and said that Iran wasn't intending to do it, even though they were, as they were saying that, they were simply looking at delivery systems solely designed to deliver nuclear payload or other non-conventional payloads. So Iran already has that. Iran has the means to enrich uranium very quickly. As a report came out yesterday that I saw said, look, 20% enriched uranium is actually 90% enriched toward being ready for a nuclear weapon. You're not talking about something that's 1/5 of the way. You're talking about something that's 9/10 of the way.
Right.
And it doesn't take much longer to get it in weapons grade, at a weapons grade level. So Iran is most of the way there already. We're talking about capability, and I've discussed this on this show before. This issue of that the United States and Israel differ on Israel wanting to oppose Iran getting the capability to create a nuclear weapon, and the United States opposed them having a nuclear weapon. The reports about Saudi Arabia having already contracted with Pakistan for nuclear weapons should scare the United States significantly, because the United States policy about Iran having a nuclear weapon is going to be preempted by Saudi Arabia getting them. The second that the Iranians have the capability of getting nuclear weapons, the Saudis are going to get their nuclear weapons. They're not going to wait until Iran has a weapon first. They're going to act once the Iranians get capability. So the race is at capability, and the United States needs to understand that its current its current red line is too far in the future. It's not the accurate red line. The accurate red line is capability.
What we're hearing, though, is that the people who don't like to apply the term capability are probably the same people who don't like the idea of a preemptive strike.
Absolutely, they are. The people who don't want any kind of action against Iran are going to push the deadline as far out as possible. Now, they're also trying to promote negotiations with Iran to keep that red line far off. If the United States can get Iran to agree to do things that will lessen its capability, that may be workable. The problem is that there's so little trust in the system right now.
Because there's probably a lot of redundancy built into the Iranian program.
Yeah.
And hidden aspects based on the fact that the Iranian program itself was hidden entirely for a good number of years, even from the UN.
Yeah, it's fairly clear that there's a lot of stuff that we don't know where it is. We don't know what level of development it is. I would be much more confident if I had much more confidence in our intelligence services. I really don't. We know that they didn't do as great a job as we would have liked in dealing with Iraq's capability. They don't seem to have a clue what's going on in Syria until Syria was willing to work with them, and we certainly have no idea what's going on with Iran. If you're talking about breakout capability of creating a nuclear weapon once they get the amount of enriched uranium that they need of a month, we can't even get a discussion in the Security Council fast enough to get anything handled there. So you could talk about things spiraling out of control very quickly in the entire region without having a real solution to Iran's capability.
Now, this spins off into looking at Israel and the speculation that in one case, it depends on whether Israel supports gay rights or not, whether eventually American support will erode for it, and the implication that Netanyahu would rather play the diplomatic game with the United States or defend this country.
Look, we can also talk about the veiled threats that Secretary Kerry made in his comments about settlements too. The reality is this. Israel knows what the Jews have long known, which is if you base all your decisions in your life on what pleases everybody else, you're not going to be Jewish very long, and if you're Israel, you're not going to be existing very long. So there's no way that that Israel can respond to Secretary of Kerry saying you're going to be increasingly isolated because you're not pleasing your enemies. They can't respond to that. I mean, that's literally what he said. I mean, I'm adding in a few words here, but what Secretary Kerry says, that Israel is going to be increasingly isolated because it's not pleasing the Palestinians, and the other nations that want to see Israel destroyed. So how in the world is Israel going to say, oh yeah, sure, you know what? It's our highest priority to please those who want to destroy us. Of course they can't. And I don't know why the United States would even think of taking that. I mean, this is one of the biggest problems I had with what Secretary of Kerry said. Not only is he holding a secret negotiation between the leaders of the Palestinians and the leaders of the Israelis where they're not supposed to speak about what's going on, then he comes out and slams what the Israelis are doing in public, and then he makes a statement about Israel being increasingly isolated by the people who want to destroy it. What does Israel care?
Or not? Besides,
or how can Israel react to that?
The more telling quote has to do if this situation is not clarified, there's going to be more violence.
Well, that may be true. I mean, there are things that Secretary of Kerry said in this statement that I agree with. I think the reality is if people in the Palestinian territories feel hopeless, if the Israelis continue to do things that make them feel like there's no chance of there being a Palestinian state, there's no chance of anything moving forward, that you're going to see people pushing the violence argument. I mean, it's very clear that what's happened over the last 30 years plus has been, let's try violence. When that's failed, let's try diplomacy. When that's failed, let's try violence again. And then let's try diplomacy again. And if that fails, it's almost assured that somebody's going to try violence again.
But that throws the ball into Israel's court. It says, we can't control the Palestinians from becoming violent.
No,
only you can.
This is where I think it's wrong, because no one is saying that violence hurts the Palestinians.
Of course, it doesn't hurt the Palestinians.
Well, it does hurt the Palestinians. They have in many places right now, they have a very good standard of living, and there could potentially be a complete trashing of their standard of living.
But the standard of living was
with
high.
A lot of dead people.
The standard of living in the West Bank was high just before the Second Intifada as well, and that didn't stop Arafat from doing the Intifada and essentially ruining the Palestinian economy. But the implication,
although it could have led to his death, depending on who poisoned him.
So it could have. But I guess the point is, look, when Kerry says to Israel, if you don't play ball, they're going to be violent against you, and it's going to be your fault.
Well, but that's a matter of who's doing the blaming.
Well, Kerry's doing the blaming.
I understand that, but I don't know. I don't think as an American we can say that. Now, John Kerry, as a progressive left-leaning Democrat, may be able to say that, and that brings up the entire political party bias issue, because I don't think Republicans would say that. So you're in a situation in which the Democrats are blaming Israel for the problems, and the Republicans would not. And that would be a very good indication. And I think the Democrats need to be very, very careful of this, because they could well turn Israel into a partisan issue on that issue alone.
And to go back to what was alluded to, the illusion was if you annoy the Christian right in America, who are your greatest supporters, by pushing a pro-gay rights agenda, you're going to destroy Israel.
Well, and look, I think it's the same. My response to that is the same as the response of pleasing your enemies. Look, Israel cannot cease to be a progressive state. It cannot cease to be a Jewish state in order to please people on either side.
So why wouldn't the American State Department understand, for instance, that Netanyahu's responsibility is to prevent nuclear weaponization from Iran at any cost?
Well, I think it does. I think the question is whether or not Israel has the capability to do it. I don't think it's an issue of whether or not Netanyahu feels that way. I don't think it's an issue of whether or not the State Department feels that way either. Israel may simply not have the capability of doing it by itself. It may need the United States to do it.
It may need the United States to do it, but the triggers are such that Israel has no compunction about doing something to protect itself in the face of possible annihilation.
I think it's very clear that Israel will act if it has to, and I think the issue is trying to delay as long as possible that eventuality.
And so, do you think this is what Kerry is doing somehow? What type of discussions is he having with Israel? Is it, we understand you're going to act unless we prolong the...
I don't think so. I mean, from what I've seen and from what I just saw from the quotes from Secretary Kerry, I have to say I don't believe that John Kerry understands the Israeli people at all.
That's the point. The fact is, how can you go into these types of relationships without understanding the situation?
I mean,
it's a terrible blow to say the American administration doesn't understand the situation.
I think that the statements that Secretary Kerry made significantly weaken the ability of the United States to be a broker. And since they're sitting there as the broker, that is saying a lot. Why in the world would you put yourself in a position where you're taking the Palestinian side against the Israelis while you're trying to assure the Israelis that you're going to support them in the eventuality of after a peace negotiation? Well, you're the only nation. I mean, the United States is the only nation that Israel can count on. So if they're being told that they're not going to be able to count on the United States, forget it. The United States is not saying here we're going to stand by Israel if the Palestinians are intransigent at the negotiating table.
The United
States is saying you're on your own.
You're on your own. Plus which they're giving credence to the Palestinian cries for whatever it is.
Absolutely.
And that's detrimental for forming the peace that we all want.
Well, it's not only that. I mean, I'm going to bring it back to this Democratic Republican Party politics here. What it does is it makes the situation so the Republicans are going to step in and completely counter what the Secretary of State said. I don't know why they're already not doing that. They may well be sitting there in D.C. right now, going word for word through this statement and saying, "What in the world is he doing?" This statement here. And I'm talking about this article from the Times of Israel this afternoon. If you want to look it up, you can go on the timesofisrael.com. Kerry slams Israel's West Bank policies, warns of third intifada. Okay, now, like I said, I'm in agreement that many Palestinians may well resort to violence if there's no agreement. I have no doubt that that's true. What I'm saying is some of the things that Secretary Kerry said here undermine the American position to be the broker, and they threaten to make Israel a partisan issue by having a gaping opening for the Republicans to step through and saying, we disagree with the Secretary of State. And we told you so that the Obama administration was going to side with the Palestinians. I mean, that's what this article is looking at. And it infuriated me when I looked at it. How can they possibly take that position? Even if it's true, even if every word he says here is true, you can't say it.
You can't articulate it in public.
You can't say it.
Yeah.
And if you do say it, you weaken your position significantly. So by saying that they're basically siding with the Palestinians in public on these issues,
and so
the Israelis are automatically going to react against it.
Is this not setting up the scenario that we're expecting, that the U.S. administration is going to come forth with another peace plan?
Well, the reports are that if nothing's happened by January, the United States may well propose a peace plan. And the problem with proposing a peace plan, a number of things. One is no peace plan is going to please either side. Nothing they propose will please either side. If the issue is that Abbas is not politically capable of compromising on right of return and some of the other things,
the basic issues,
and that Netanyahu is not politically capable of compromising on some of these things, it doesn't matter what the United States proposes. If there's no political capability to make it happen, then they could propose the moon. It doesn't matter.
Well, I can envision the fact that some of the people from the left especially says it's about time the United States is going to impose its plan.
Well, look, if the United States imposes the plan to the point of extortion, then what you're going to have is Israel withdrawing from its close relationship with the United States and moving to other people. I mean, it'd still have a certain relationship because it'd wait for the next administration.
Right.
I mean, Israel could well say, "Okay, we're going to wait 4 years. You're going to let Iran go nuclear because we're not making peace with the Palestinians. You're totally insane."
But the critics who would support the imposition of a plan would say, in essence, Israel is going against American interests, and why shouldn't America have its own interests?
America should have its own interests. I'm talking about how you go about getting them. And one of America's interests should not be harming its allies to benefit its enemies.
And the critics would also say, we give Israel X billions of dollars. Why shouldn't the United States lean on Israel to do something?
Well, the same reason it's not effective in dealing with Egypt. Israel doesn't need the aid right now. The primary, I mean, it's happy to get it. But the primary reason you give aid is to have influence. If you cease giving aid, you cease having influence.
Well,
and Israel could certainly work with other countries around the world and get arms. There are plenty of countries that would like to have influence in Israel in dealing with the trade and airspace and technology and all kinds of other things. I mean, this understanding that the United States doesn't benefit from a relationship with Israel is ridiculous. The United States benefits hugely from its relationship with Israel and to a certain extent grossly in disproportion for the aid that it gives Israel. So the reality here is that none of these threats the United States could make against Israel are going to be effective. And anything that talks about, the world, the international community is arrayed against Israel, well, that's been true. The international community has been arrayed against Jews for years. What's new? I mean, the vast bulk of the international community is either Christian or Muslim, and guess what? Both of them have persecuted Jews for most of the last 1,500 years, and or 1,300 years at least. So you're not dealing with arguments that are going to hold much water here.
Well, factor in one more thing. It's again the raising of the leverage and the linkage issue.
Well, and the linkage issue, I just wrote an article on the linkage issue on the weareforisrael.org website yesterday. So Mark is referring, thankfully, to my article about the fallacy of linkage, and it's still a fallacy. The reality is that the Arab nations who will ever support military action against Iran already do. They are not prioritizing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in any way, shape, or form. They want Iran stopped from getting nuclear weapons. End of story. There's no only if, there's no it would be nice if first, nothing like that. So they couldn't care less about Israeli-Palestinian peace. In fact, there's a lot of opposition to any progress because the Arab nations know that there's no way that all those refugees are going to become coming back either to Palestine or Israel, and therefore they would have to accept them as citizens, and they don't want to do that either. Jordan does not want to have a huge percentage of its population who would want democratic rights in Jordan stay there because they can't come to a Palestinian state or Israel. So Jordan's perfectly happy with no agreement.
So isn't it conceivable that the American administration truly believes that linkage is the primary factor, and then by trying, that's the reason, to twist arms so as to eliminate, we hear this all the time, if the Israeli-Palestinian conflict were to go away tomorrow, it might not solve all the problems, but it just takes another problem off the table.
Well, it does take another problem off the table. I mean, let's talk about the reality here. There are people who are pissed off at the United States for its support of Israel. There are people who are upset with Israel for its treatment of the Palestinians. I mean, in and of itself, it is a problem. And speaking as somebody who's an advocate for a two-state solution, I want to see the Palestinians have their own state. I want to see Israel not have to have control and dominion over a large percentage of its population that it doesn't want to grant citizenship rights. That needs to end. The question is how to go about doing that, right? And putting that in context of the Sunni-Shia conflict, it's ridiculous. It's like talking about a gang war in Chicago compared to a war between the United States and Europe, for example. I mean, you're sitting here in a situation where the Sunni-Shia conflict is so much bigger. It is vastly bigger. You're talking about conflicts that have killed millions of people historically, millions of people, not few thousand, not that threatened an intifada that would cost hundreds of lives. You're talking about conflicts that cost tens of thousands of lives a month around the world. You're talking about a conflict that has cost over 100,000 lives in Syria alone in the last half year. So the idea that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict somehow is the premier conflict is absurd. And Iranian nuclear weapons are part of the Sunni-Shia conflict. They're part of a much larger conflict that threatens to cause vast amounts more damage than anything having to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, to the point that the people who are involved in that conflict couldn't care less whether the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is resolved. What they want is the United States not to pay attention to the gang war in Chicago. They want the United States to pay attention to the major threat coming from against the entire country. The Saudis want the United States to keep their eye on the ball. Okay, we heard the administration talking about keeping its eye on the ball and dealing with al-Qaeda and all this stuff. The ball right now is Iran. The Saudis couldn't care less what's going on with anybody else. They want to see the United States pay attention to Iran. Egypt wants the United States to pay attention to Iran. Okay, the rest of the Gulf region wants the United States to pay attention to Iran. All those countries are in agreement with Israel right now as to what the priority is.
So I can see the American administration says, yes, we know the main problem is Iran. We can't fix Iran right now, but what we can do is spend a little more elbow grease and try to fix this one.
Leon Wieseltier said a statement that I think is perfectly appropriate. It's perfectly fine for most of us to be bystanders. We can all say, you know what, I can't figure out why it should be. I can't affect it. If you're the president of the United States, if you're running our security, you don't have a choice of being a bystander. We have to. This is not a let's try. This is a do not try. We have to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. We have to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon at all costs.
Okay. Are we transitioning then to a containment strategy?
I think a containment strategy is already a disaster. And I think if we're transitioning to a containment strategy, we've already lost so much. There's so much damage is going to happen in the region because the containment is not going to be just containment of Iran. It's going to be containment of nuclear weapons in Saudi Arabia. It's going to be containment of nuclear weapons in Egypt. It's going to be vastly ramped up military-industrial complex with all kinds of skirmishes going on with the constant threat of nuclear retaliation for any of them. You're talking about an escalation of the violence in the region that the region has never seen. And you're talking about that because the United States is unwilling to attack nuclear reactors in Iran. It makes no sense to even consider a containment strategy.
My question, though, is there the likelihood that the strategy of the United States has subtly already shifted to containment?
Well, like I said, I mean, if I'm hoping that they're not lying when they say it hasn't. I mean, that's the only thing I can tell you. I'm hoping that they're not lying when they say it hasn't, because if they are lying, we're already up to our necks in it. I mean, that's the reality we're dealing with. I don't think it's going to get there because I don't think the Israelis can allow it to happen. I think the Israelis will attack Iran every other month for the next 3 years until a Republican gets elected, if that's the case. Even just to delay it, they will do that. I believe that. I think that the Israelis are under the impression that no Republican would be making the decisions that they're facing right now with the Democrats. And if they feel that way, the Democrats need to understand that they're going to act. And this is a problem for the Obama administration, because the Obama administration can't act as if it's the only voice that's ever going to speak for the United States. It's got to understand that there's a time limit here, and that if the Israelis feel like all they need to do is hold out for the next administration, they may well do that.
I have to believe that the administration understands that Israel will act in its own best interest.
And look, another possibility here, Mark, and I hate to say that because I hate to be the conspiracy theorist, is that there could be an attempt to distance the United States from Israel prior to an Israeli attack. The United States could well be prepping for an Israeli attack and then hoping to step in and be the mediator. It's possible. I don't like taking that position, but I do think it's possible. Because I mean, from what I see from this Kerry article, from this article about the negotiations, it makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever for John Kerry to be taking this position unless there are two possibilities. One is he really does want to distance the United States from Israel. And the other one is that he wants to try to reach out to the Palestinians who he's afraid are going to simply pull out of the negotiations and torpedo everything that he's done up to this point with no gain. If that's the possibility, if that's the argument, then the problem here is that the United States is trying to push through things that simply aren't going to happen, because there's no way that Israel is going to agree to the extent that those negotiators want.
Now, despite the fact that there are Palestinian provocative actions, everybody points to, number one, the construction of more settlement housing, and number two is seemingly Netanyahu's insistence that the Jordan Rift has to stay under Israeli military control.
Well, and you had a situation here in which John Kerry spoke out almost directly against Netanyahu's argument, which doesn't make sense either. I mean, you've got you've got numerous.
Which argument?
He made the argument that Israeli troops can't be in the West Bank, okay, which would seem to imply that they can't be on the Jordanian border.
Right.
So
Why would he do that? Because that really breaks a couple of the rules.
well, one, it's entirely possible that the rules have gone out the window at this point because of the Palestinian side coming out and saying this because of Israeli approval of settlements. It's possible that what was a cap on the negotiations, a security cap, is no longer there.
Yeah.
In which case, there's no way that these negotiations go forward because that was the essential nature of the security, was to keep the outsiders from complaining about what was being conceded. And if that's now open, there's no way the negotiations are going to be able to move.
Well, let's take 3 instances. First of all, what's your analysis of Israel's need to?
We only have a few seconds here, but
Sorry, go ahead. Call a commercial then.
so we're at the end of our time. We have next week 2 special guests from the Religious Action Center, Rachel Laser, and I think it's Rachel, it may be Rachel Laser, to use her Hebrew name, and Barbara Weinstein, who will be joining us from the Religious Action Center next week. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. This has been Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman, and I will see you next week.
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling.
We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
Thanks for joining.